I'm Annie, the Divine Witch, and we are here today. No, this isn't it. Actually, I'm just going to let it keep going because I can edit all this out later. So, how do you feel about ghosts? Do you believe in them? Have you felt them? Have you had experiences with them? Is there something that you're skeptical about? Is it all a bunch of BS? Are you like, I don't know. Well, today we're going to dig into one of my favorite topics, which is the afterlife, the spiritual, and those who are still floating around, haunting us to this day. Welcome to Ghost Chats with me, Annie the Divine Witch. And, you know, if I come up with an intro at some point, let the intro roll out like right now. So, one of my favorite things to talk about is the afterlife, the undead. Well, maybe not the undead, but I do love a good vampire story. And as someone who has had experiences with ghosts, seen ghosts, felt ghosts, had some spooky moments, several, in my lifetime, I feel like, at least in my own mind, I am somewhat of an authority on spooky season and the things that come along with that. Now, one thing I will say is the spirit realm is interesting, and I do, once you get to know me, love to always bring in a little bit of cleansing energy whenever I have these moments. So, if you want to, and if you choose to right now, get cozy, sit down, grab your favorite cup of tea, or if you're doing stuff and listening to me in the background, cool. Take a breath in with me right now and exhale. And I just love to offer up a little protection, because if you're even remotely sensitive and you're listening to this content and you have a moment where you're like, oh my God, I feel spooked out right now and this is scary. Let's just have a little, keep you safe moment. And you can fast forward over this part of the video if you're like, okay, this isn't for me. So if you are taking on the protection, I want you just to close your eyes for a moment and just feel your feet planted wherever they are. Okay. Now, if you're driving, obviously don't do this. But if you're not, just let yourself be focused in, feet to floor, connected down. And from there, I want you to imagine that you are wrapping yourself in a protective bubble. And that bubble can be whatever you want it to be. It can be pink and puffy. It can be like a concrete wall. I just want you to imagine yourself kind of wrapping yourself in this protective layer so that whatever comes through is only going to come through if you allow it to. Okay? And I want you just to seal it all around your body, 360, the whole circle. And then I want you to take one more full breath in and a long breath out. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. We're going to dive in. So let's talk about ghosts. I will say, as someone who has experienced ghosts firsthand, who is a medium-ish, meaning that I have connected with spirits. I've certainly seen them. I've certainly spoken with them. But do I actively have this open gateway for spirits to flow in and out? Not so much. I am very much a believer in lots of boundaries and lots of space. And I'll be 100% honest with you, as someone who has been in the realm of the metaphysical most of my life and a practicing witch for, quite a while. Connecting with spirits sometimes can be really draining. And so for me, I prefer to experience it and talk about it rather than channel it. You know what I mean? But as someone who has had experiences leading from anything to seeing what seems to be like a wispy looking spirit floating around in someone's laundry room, to physically feeling someone put their hands on me and having no one there, there's been a lot of things that have happened. So the first thing that I want to speak to, at least in my own experience, is the way spirits kind of manifest in land. And this is a common question that I get from people, especially after people have passed on, that want to connect into their relatives and so on. So that is a thing. Sometimes I will have clients that come in and do that. So just a little heads up, FYI for you. Spirits can manifest themselves in a few different ways. And typically what we would see in a haunting is a spirit that is on some level kind of stuck in the place that they died in and isn't necessarily unaware that they've passed on, but certainly for whatever reason, they have some sort of unfinished business that they need to move through in order for them to go to whatever realm they go to after they leave this earth. Okay, so quite a lot of historic locations, specifically places like Bowmanville, like Kingston, even Toronto, they have spirits that are in a way kind of stuck in those spaces because of a few key factors. Sometimes and often it's close to water. There's just something traumatic that happened in the house or in the space that they frequented most. That causes them to want to stay there. Some spirits just don't necessarily want to move on and for whatever reason feel the need to stay connected to wherever they were when they were alive. And so often that's what you'll see in a typical haunting is a spirit who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to move on, whether they feel like they have unfinished business or they are, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, afraid of what comes after. They have these moments of just kind of landing and being in the space that they felt most comfortable. Now, of course, for some people that would be their home, but I've certainly seen offices that have been haunted, land that's been haunted. I know that there's kind of a bit of controversy around cemeteries and whether or not they're haunted. I mean, it makes sense based on the fact that, you know, they're generally full of dead people. But then there are arguments and conversations about the fact that sometimes, like, why would anybody's spirit want to stay stuck in a cemetery? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. But then there are also many experiences that people have had about or in cemeteries. So I don't know. Take that for whatever you will. Another type of manifestation that I've seen throughout my lifetime is a spirit who lingers post their passing around people that they really care about. Now, what I will say to that is definitely that does happen. And there are certainly souls who even can pass away suddenly, or even if they've been sick for long periods of time, that choose to stay with the people that they care for to make sure that they're okay. Now, I have seen this very frequently where people just have, the people who are living, who are left behind, are having such a hard time letting go of the person who's passed away, that for whatever reason, that family member just kind of stays to make sure that their people are okay. And some signs generally that come up around that, especially after someone you cared about has passed on, is there almost feels like a density or a thickness to the air that's like heavier, like the soul is kind of hanging around. And then there are other things too, like of course temperature fluctuations and so on. But I've seen this phenomenon happen quite a bit, especially with people who are just having a really hard time with their grief and don't know how to let go. Or I've seen it happen with spirits who, well, how do I want to word this? Have died suddenly. And it's not that they don't know they're dead. They're just transitioning very slowly. So I actually had a friend whose partner passed away by accidental overdose. They ended up taking alcohol and oxycodone together. I suppose I should probably have had a trigger warning before I said all of this, so maybe I'll edit that in there somewhere. And ultimately, they ended up just passing. And it's funny because well, it's not funny. It's something that they'd done many, many times without any issues. But that one time, they just didn't wake up. And so when I was at that person's funeral and their partner was moving through, obviously, the grief of everything that was going on, it was so shocking. He was like, did I actually die? Like, is this it? And it was a little bit jarring for me because I was like, yes, sorry, dude, but you passed on, friend. Like, whatever happened, it ended up taking you out. And he essentially had said back to me, but I've done it like 100 times. I was like, well, this was the time that was it for you, unfortunately. Sorry. And so coming to grips with the idea that he has, in fact, left this earthly plane, if you want to call it that. I've seen that. And what I will say about that type of spirit is they generally don't tend to linger for a very long time. They stick around because, one, they're coming to terms with the fact that they've passed, and two, they are just making sure that everybody's all right. Like, this is a big transitional moment. And I mean, when I've seen it happen quite a bit with people who have had like a sudden heart attack or car accident, etc., their spirit just wants to hang out and make sure everybody's all right. This also tends to happen, I find, with a lot of elderly relatives who are very connected to their family unit. They want to make sure that their people are okay. And eventually they do go and move on, and sometimes they'll pop in and pop out. It's often why you'll hear people say, you know, my grandfather has been gone for 5 years, but I had a dream about him last night, and we just had a chit chat about, you know, what's going on. And then I woke up and was like, oh my God. That is a thing that also happens. So it doesn't necessarily mean the spirit's stuck. It just means that they are lingering around to make sure everybody's good, and then they will move on. So that is another phenomenon that I see. Another phenomenon that's actually really interesting that isn't necessarily haunting per se is almost described as like an energetic signature left in a space. So sometimes when there's been an incident or something ongoing in a space that has a lot of history, or is in, you know, the right kind of conditions in terms of location. And the best way I can describe it is through examples. So let's have this moment. If you, okay, I'm going to edit this out later. So fine. A couple purchases a home together. Okay. And when they first move in, everything's great. And then eventually what ends up happening is it degrades down. They have a lot of issues, a lot of arguments, etc. And ultimately they decide to part ways and divorce. And then the next couple moves into the house. And then weirdly, there's this sort of energetic signature, this emotional residue that's left behind in the space, where for whatever reason they were okay when they first moved in, but then things start to degrade and fall apart, and then they get a divorce and they sell the house, and then the next couple moves in and something very similar happens. So this is like an emotional residue, an energetic signature, where it's almost like locked into the walls. If there's a repeated emotion over a certain period of time that keeps showing up over and over again, that can be confused with haunting, because I've even seen phenomenon of people like hearing voices, or feeling like cold spots, or feeling very emotional in places where, like the example that I used, people feel like there's this weird energetic signature left over in the space. So that is something that does happen. And I find that tends to happen with historic homes more often than not. But if you've had similar experiences to people who've lived in the space that you've lived in, which is often why I will say to people when they get their homes cleared, like, do you know who lived here before you? Because a lot of the time the feedback is we were fine, and then we moved in and everything started to fall apart. And it's interesting because that can manifest as a haunting, but it's not. It's just this sort of leftover energy that hasn't gone anywhere and gets stuck in the walls. So it's not like you're necessarily going to see a spirit, but there is definitely an emotional residue that's left over that just needs to be cleared out. Okay. And then the one other thing I will say is with spirit, often you'll see, for some people, they have the experience when someone passes on where it's like the person, their soul just literally left their body and that was it. You didn't hear anything, see anything, nothing after they were gone. That is a phenomenon that I've seen actually a few times in my lifetime, where when someone passes away, and I usually will say that it's people who tend to have been very sick for long periods of time and immobile, or people who are like, for whatever reason, immobile, disabled, what have you, where they finally just eject from their body, they're free, and off they go. So it's almost as if their soul just like jets and heads wherever it's meant to go. Now, what's so interesting about that, what I find, is there is an unraveling of the energy when people kind of leave their body in that way. But most of the time you'll hear people, especially family members or people who are close to that person, say it's almost like they were just here and then they were gone. And what I would say to you in that is a phenomenal sign that this soul has cleared whatever it needed to clear. It's learned whatever it needed to learn in its lifetime, and there she goes. Okay. So those are generally spirits that you'll see. Obviously, the latter is a little less about haunting and a little bit more about reassurance of like, listen, they're good, they're happy, let them go their merry way. Now, one other thing I will speak to, and this is where things get a little darker. So if you get easily spooked, have this moment with me. You may want to skip this part of the video. If you have moments with, I don't know what, maybe this part isn't for you. But if you want to be informed, you want to have some idea of how to protect yourself, if you want to, I don't know, maybe confirm that you're not totally delusional, have this moment with me. There are things such as darker spirits or entities that do show up in haunted spaces. Now, what I will say, especially now, there's more of a sort of surge of these darker energies. Some people would refer to them as the shadow people. And it's interesting because there's sort of a back and forth in the spiritual community about how much energy we should be giving to these quote unquote entities that exist, because there's a level almost of like, if you don't know about it, you can't feed into that energy. Personally, I'm a big fan of education. I think it's important, especially if you tend to be a very sensitive person in the first place, that you know and are aware of what's going on out there, okay? So what I would say when it comes to shadow people, and they do manifest in a few different ways, but generally they look like these blacked out, completely like a shadow being, that can be shaped in different ways. Sometimes they look just like a regular shadow that just seems not quite right. Sometimes they look like they have almost like a Grim Reaper like hood. Sometimes they look like they're wearing almost like a hat, and I'm sure you have all heard of the Hat Man if you're here, and maybe if you haven't, that's another rabbit hole we can go down another day. But shadow people, generally speaking, their purpose is to influence energy and emotion into more negativity, okay? So I've seen a phenomenon where if there is a lot of tragedy in a space, over the course of time, what ends up happening is shadow people start to show up and tend to start to feed off of the energy of the space that they're in. Now, shadow people also love populous spaces. So schools, hospitals, funeral homes, and the like generally tend to get hit with those entities a little bit more. Now, a lot of it just has to do with the fact that they really do love to feed off of the energy of other people, which sounds so gross, but it is true. And then they also like to, again, influence, kind of feed out negativity in a way that causes people to feed more into the fear of them and then making them stronger. So that is a phenomenon that I've seen. And what I will say in that moment is it's almost like black on black blackness, like so dark that you almost can't see through it. And even if your eyes adjust, they don't, like it's just a void. So that is a thing that does happen in hauntings that I've seen from time to time. And it's, I can't lie, pretty scary. But I have a remedy for you, so we'll have this moment. And then, of course, there's the darker entities. and even to, tap onto demonic entities, that does happen. Okay. There are certainly spirits in this world that, just like humans, they weren't exactly the best people. And if they don't heal, repent, frame that however you want to, or want to move back into the light, then often you'll see entities that have more strength, more capacity, and tend to do more unnerving things, I should say, like flicker the lights, or push people over, or scratch people, or break glass, etc., etc. Now, demonic entities, in terms of spirits, a little bit different. And they do tend to also show up with certain smells, certain timelines. Particularly, they like to toot around at like 3 a.m. Take that for whatever you will. They most certainly have more of the scare factor than I would say anything else does in terms of this conversation. But let me just say this. When it comes to the spirit realm and anything that seems to come through to you, you are the one with the power, my friend. You have the light. You are a live, living body on this plane. And with that, you also hold more power than something that lives on the spiritual plane that's trying to break through here, however they do. Okay? So, yes, fear is a thing. And the more you're afraid of whatever these things are, the more they can feed off of your energy, because you're focused on the fact that they have power over you, when in truth, they kind of don't. They don't really. I mean, if you're in fear, obviously, it's not like you can always snap your fingers and be like, cool, I'm good, and I'm going to just wrap myself in white light and here we go. But what I will say is you have a unique opportunity to really say to yourself, okay, cool, am I feeding into the fear of some bumps, some darkness, some loud noises, and is anything actually really happening to me? Okay. So wrapping yourself up in a bubble is a really great tool to use to make sure that you're safe when you're in places like that. Especially if you do want to go exploring and do some spiritual work. What I would say to you, if you do want to do those things, is to, one, make sure you don't do it alone. Or if you're going to go cuckoo and go do it on your own, make sure you inform people where you're at. Stay in communication to let people know where you are. Make sure that you have the tools and all the things. But I highly recommend that if you are going to go check out spiritual places that are haunted, that you go with people and you keep people informed about where you're at. Because here's the truth. There are some incredible locations that, like, functionally are falling apart. And I've seen people who've gone to do haunting investigations and all of those things end up getting really hurt because they don't realize that the places they're going into have been abandoned for however many years, and the floor is rotted out. There's glass everywhere. Like, I've been in locations where like steel beams have fallen down. You really should not be doing this work on your own. Okay. And lots of research beforehand. P.S. Protect yourself. Okay. I love black crystals, obsidian, tourmaline, smoky quartz, anything on your person to kind of absorb any negativity and to reflect back. And if you don't want to continue to carry it with you, if you go to a haunted location, you can just take the crystal out of your pocket and put it back into the earth and leave it where you found it. Okay. You can also say a collective prayer for yourself if you plan to go check out any of these spiritual haunts. Sorry, terrible pun, but we're here. Because most definitely you should go into places like this protected. If you do encounter any kind of shadow people or anything else, what I will say to you is this: don't be afraid to curse at them. Literally, you are the one with the power. You can tell them to get the F out, to leave you alone, to get away from you. Don't be afraid to shout at them. Don't be afraid to take them down a notch. Don't be afraid to do any of that. Because I personally, especially if something has popped into my home and the first person to be like, I don't think so, you need to get the F out of here. Like, now, get out. You are not welcome here. Your words hold a lot of power. And there's a reason why swears are called curse words, because you can literally push energies out and away from you. I don't think, and I think one mission that I will say I have moving forward as far as all this work goes is it's okay to be curious about ghosts. It's okay to be curious about the spirit world. It's okay to even dig into it a little bit, and to explore and learn and even tap into the history of the spaces that you're going to check out. It's, for me, a really cool way to kind of keep, no pun intended, things alive. And so that we remember lessons that we've learned from the past so that we don't carry that forward. But what I will also say is there's a really cool opportunity for you to really like tap into the things that you're afraid of, as much as it might sound crazy. When it comes to ghosts, spirits, etc., hauntings, there's definitely a level of the unknown that comes up for people a lot. And without maybe always realizing it, it's a beautiful opportunity for you to look at, well, what am I actually afraid of here? And if you can give yourself time and space to confront your fear, you can heal a lot of stuff that maybe is holding you back. And I think that may be the biggest reason why I like to do this work in particular, in terms of looking at hauntings and digging in, is because what it teaches me over and over again is the idea that I'm way stronger than I think I am. I'm braver than I think I am. And every time I face my fear, I heal something in myself that's been holding me back. So, I mean, we're coming close to Halloween now and what have you, but I don't know, maybe if you see this is your sign to say, maybe it's time for me to lean in a little bit around this realm and just see what comes up. It doesn't mean you have to go to a haunted location, but maybe you have an opportunity to heal some stuff that you hold around the spirit realm and what that means for you, Well, that's all we have for today. But I will be back to share my stories, haunted content, ghost info, and other fun and fantastic things that we will be doing over here in the realm of the tube. As always, like, comment, subscribe if this is a vibe for you, if you're feeling it. And thank you for being here. And thank you for listening if you made it this far. Have a wonderful day. There you have it.